From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Guy Lamolinar from the Center for the Book, which is the co-sponsor of our program today. Just a little bit about the Center for the Book is we're a small division in the library, and we promote books, reading, libraries, and literacy. And we also administer here at the library our Young Readers Center and the Poetry and Literature Center. And we have a nationwide mission that we carry out through the assistance of our affiliated Centers for the Book. We have one in every state. We have one here in D.C., and we even have one in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we also have a partnership with more than 80 like-minded organizations around the country. And we play an important role in the National Book Festival because we're the office that invites the authors. And if you want to learn more about us, you can just go to read.gov. But before we get started, I just want to ask you to please turn off all your electronic devices and to tell you that we're recording this event. So if you ask a question at the end of the program, you'll become a part of our webcast. Our webcasts are all available online at read.gov. And if you've missed a program in our Books and Beyond series, you can see more than 200 of these discussions on that website. And I also want to let you know that today's book, this beautiful book here, will be on sale following the program, and the authors will be here to sign it. And it retails for $55, but today it'll be sold for $40, so it's a great opportunity to get this great book. Sometimes we're asked why we do certain programs here and why we don't do other books, and one of the major criteria we have for this is that the book has to have been researched here at the Library of Congress, and this book is filled with resources from here at the library, amazing things. And we're also fortunate to be able to co-sponsor programs with other divisions here in the library, and today we are co-sponsoring with our publishing office. And I'm pleased to introduce Margaret Peggy Wagner, who will introduce today's speakers. Peggy is a senior writer and editor in the publishing office, currently acting as the managing editor, and she herself is an author of several of the library's outstanding publications, including The American Civil War, 365 Days, and World War II, 365 Days. So please welcome Peggy Wagner.
Thank you very much, Guy. Can you hear me? We are all in the publishing office. We are all great fans of the Center for the Book, and a small but dauntless team next door to our small but dauntless team. And thank you all for joining us as we celebrate the publication of a wonderful new book, Explorers, Immigrants, Citizens, A Visual History of the Italian-American Experience from the Collections of the Library of Congress. Published simultaneously in English and Italian editions, this epic achievement includes an astounding array of materials. Explorers, Immigrants, Citizens was a collaborative effort. And I will just pause for a commercial here. This is the book catalog for this year's recent publications, and there are copies of it on the back table. But to go on about the collaborative nature of this book, in addition to our publishing partner, it involves many people from throughout the library. And you will find their names in the acknowledgments of the book. I just like to single out here our publishing office colleague, Peter Devereaux, who is there in the front row, who has contributed to this book much time and the benefits of his multiple talents. The publishing office is always delighted to find an exceptional private sector partner. In this case, an exceptional private sector partner found us by contacting us on our website. And I will salute also Susan Rayburn, who answered his email, his initial email. Paolo Battaglia is the head of Anniversary Books, the library's publishing partner for this exceptional tome. Formerly the curator, director of a photo museum, and a specialist in the history of photography, as well as a graphic designer, Paolo is co-author of Explorers, Emigrants, Citizens. He is a person of amazing energy and artistry, and we are very fortunate to have worked with him. His co-author, Linda Barrett Osborne, is a former publishing office colleague of ours. A talented editor and writer, her books include 2 highly praised works for young people, Traveling the Freedom Road, From Slavery and the Civil War Through Reconstruction, and Miles to Go for Freedom, Segregation and Civil Rights in the Jim Crow Years. Please join me in welcoming, in the order in which they'll be speaking, Linda Barrett Osborne and Paolo Battaglia.
Hi, welcome. I'm the lesser-known act that starts the show before the big guy comes on. My name is Linda Barrett Osborne. I think several of you know me because I worked here for 15 years in the publishing office, which I would like to thank for supporting this book, and also thank the Center for the book for letting us be here today. What most people don't know is that I am all Italian American. I have 8 great-grandparents who came here from Italy in the 1880s and 90s. All my grandparents were Italian American, born here. By the time I was born in 1949, my parents had changed their name because they felt they were suffering discrimination in terms of employment and opportunities to Barrett. So I was Linda Barrett, and I married Bob Osborne. That's why I'm Linda Barrett Osborne and look so odd on the cover of this book with all the Italian last names. But I'm the real thing, through and through. I've always identified with my Italian-American heritage. Was about to retire from the library when I met Paolo and decided I would work with him on this book, which has great personal meaning for me. Because I know nothing about my great-grandparents and really very little about my family history, but we are telling stories here in this book, stories of many immigrants, and those stories, I think, repeat what my great-grandparents must have gone through. Now, Paolo came to us to bring the book to us with the idea of thinking about what it means to immigrate or emigrate from a country, immigrate to a country. Italy, which sent so many immigrants here, is now the location where immigrants go. Immigrants, wow. You should have seen us back and forth on that word because we were writing from 2 perspectives, Italian and American. And they're not dealing well with their immigrant population. Paolo hoped that by producing a book like this, Italians might realize that they had been immigrants and immigrants too. They had been badly treated and they had somehow managed to succeed. I was interested in this book because I think immigration is a huge issue in our country as well, possibly for different reasons. I think both countries can learn something from the stories in this book. As I say, it moves through some of the most difficult periods of discrimination through to success. I didn't know about the quota laws, really. I didn't know about American foreign policy and national policy regarding immigration until I started working on this book, not in detail. Millions and millions of Italians came here before the 1920s. In 1924, a Quota Act was passed that was actually refined in terms of numbers by 1929 that limited the immigration of Italians to a little more than 5,000 people a year. But other groups were affected as well, especially Eastern Europeans and Jewish immigrants, who were all considered by the prevailing government, and I haven't used the word Anglo-Saxon since I studied medieval poetry in college, but Anglo-Saxon is what the literature calls it. People were coming to an Anglo-Saxon country which was afraid of the influx of immigrants, thought they could never assimilate, and that somehow we, my great-grandparents, I guess, were less than human. So they did suffer not only politically but socially. They tended to remain in their own neighborhoods, partly because no one else wanted them. So I learned all of this, and if you read the book, you will too. And I also learned a few lovely facts that I would never have come across. One is that, does anybody know where the statue of Lincoln in the memorial was carved? Yes, in the Bronx, thank you. By the Piccirilli brothers, who carved just about every monumental sculpture of the period, including the lions in front of the 42nd Street Library in New York, and brought down here. I learned about very early relationship of Thomas Jefferson with Philip Mazzei, who was his neighbor and an Italian, and who wrote about independence for Virginia periodicals. And we think that some of his words were actually used by Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. I also learned that you can't always tell people by their names or their faces, because Bruce Springsteen is half Italian. And his mother's name is Zerilli, and when he performed, there's a picture in the book of the album that was sold bootleg in Italy when he performed, and it says Bruce Zerilli on it, not Springsteen. But I also learned that Robert De Niro is only 1/4 Italian, even though he identifies with his Italian side. So we had fun in the book mixing up and challenging perceptions. Challenging perceptions about the Mafia or Jersey Girls or Jersey Housewives or whatever being the only model for an Italian American in this country. I mean, we have Nancy Pelosi, we have my favorite Bart Giamatti, who was president of Yale and also head of baseball. So as I say, that's what we try to do. But I won't speak anymore. I will introduce Paolo, who conceived this book entirely. He came with an incredible outline. We followed his guidance throughout. He translated back and forth from Italian to English. He kept us going on a rigorous schedule. And he is going to show you some of the images in the book, which are at the heart of the book. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know if I'm the big guy, but I'm here to tell you some more about this book. I have to tell you that the last time I spoke in front of an audience in English was after I won a football game during high school with a field goal. It was a double overtime playoff, so everybody was around me and were asking things to me. So it's going to be a little hard for me to speak in front of an audience in English, but I'll try to do my best. And I'm so happy to be here today because it's the end of an incredible history for me. It all started with a simple email that I sent to the Library of Congress. I have a very small company. We're four people, actually 5. There was my daughter who just quit because she's going to design school, so we're now only down to 4. But sometimes I do bold things, and a couple of years ago I came up with an idea on a book on Italian-American immigrations. And I wanted to find a partner in the United States, and so why not the Library of Congress? And so I tried, I looked through your website, and you have a page in which you can actually send proposal to the publishing office. So I wrote down the proposal, and unexpectedly, after 2 weeks, Susan answered, and she said, yeah, why don't we talk about it? And so I came here, and we started working on this book, which is today reality, and I'm here to present it, so it's incredible for me. And as Peggy was saying before, it's been done both in Italian and in English. I want to show you also the Italian cover. And the title here is Trovare l'America. Trovare l'America means finding America, but it means so much more to us Italians. It also means fulfilling your dreams, because people coming here to America many times fulfilled their dreams. They were able to accomplish things that they couldn't accomplish in Italy. And so this is my way of paying a tribute to all the people that came here and did extraordinary things. Many of them just led their life, simple life, but they did it bringing some of my country here. And I think today, I was talking before to some people, today Italy is probably one of the most loved countries in the United States because of its food, of its design, of all the beautiful things that we do. We decided to start the book with the image that you can see on the screens. It's an image that shows that from the ground up, the Library of Congress was an Italian accomplishment. There were American architects, but there were a lot of Italian people that worked at building the Library of Congress. And here in your beautiful archives, you have a few nice albums describing all the building of the Library of Congress, and we chose this image to open the book because this is the marble carving shop, and most of the marblers were coming from Tuscany, so where still today they extract most of the marble that goes around the world. And this is the first image that we decided to show, to tell that Italians belong to the Library of Congress from the very beginning. We didn't mention that we have in the book a foreword by a very important person. Martin Scorsese decided to write a foreword for our book, and he chose this picture to illustrate his foreword. And as I was telling people during the presentations that we had in the last couple of weeks, this image connects me with Italian Americans much more than other images that you see in the book, because this is his parents' living room, and it looks exactly like my grandmother's living room, especially the couch with the plastic. It was something that every Italian house in the 1960s and 70s had. So it's another way to. Sorry?
Not just Italian.
Yeah. And of course, we started from the very beginning. The first chapter is Explorers, and we started with 1507 map that was the first map that had the word America in it. And you have the only copy existing in the world here at the Library of Congress. It was a great emotion also to hold in my hands a manuscript called Trevisan manuscript, and it was written by an Italian ambassador to Spain, and he was a personal friend of Columbus, and he described his talks with Columbus, and it's actually one of the few existing examples of the tale of his first voyages. So yeah, that too was a great emotion. During the research, we found out a few things that nobody in Italy knew. Like, we didn't know that there was an Italian photographer. His name was Carlo Gentile. He had a very adventurous life. He went to British Columbia first, and he became a gold prospector. Then he went to San Francisco. He opened a photo studio there. And then he decided that he wanted to take pictures of American Indians. And he went to Arizona, New Mexico, and he took some of the first photographs of American Indians, of natives. And it's a great history for us in Italy because we're very keen on American West. We think we know everything about the American West. You probably know about Spaghetti Western, which was a kind of a Western film that we came up with. But we didn't know about Carlo Gentile, and I think he could be a very good subject for a film because after taking photos of natives, he decided to adopt a young Apache, and his adopted son became the first Indian to ever become a doctor. And he also took part of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, so he had a very adventurous life, which I think it could be a very nice movie. We don't know much about the Michelangelo of the capital, Costantino Brumidi. In Italy, he's not very well known. He left from Rome in the 1850s. He came to New York first and then to Washington, and he won the he became the main painter of the capital by drawing a fresco in the gardens while other people were building the capital. And this is his major accomplishment in the dome of the Capitol. The first chapter deals with individuals, so people like Costantino Brumidi, who came here for political reasons, for religious reasons. The second chapter is Emigrants, and we deal with a great mass of people that moved from Italy between 1870s and 1920. They came for many different reasons. Most of them came from the south, because the south was the poorest region. You probably know that until 1860, Italy was not a nation. There were, I'd say, 10 different kingdoms, small or big kingdoms, and they were enemies. In 1860s, they were able to unify the country, but it was a political unification. It was not economical, and so most people in the South suffered from this unification very much, and many of them left, and they came either to the United States or to Argentina and Brazil, where there are even more Italians than there are here in the States. And we chose this image to represent the moment in which Italians came to the United States, and they brought some of their customs. One of them was to hang all their wash clothes like this. This looks like an image that could have been taken in Naples, very much like. So we chose this one as the first image of the second chapter. We were able also to find more unusual, more hidden images. Like this one, this is Paul Revere house. And we chose it because you probably won't see it, but in the window shop, it says Gioielleria, and there is an Italian name. So even in Paul Revere's house in Boston, there were Italians at that time. And so we try to use some of the most seen images, like this one that we put on the back cover of the Italian version, but also some more unusual, like this one coming from Boston. And sometimes it was hard to pick things, to select things, and we tried to select images that had even hidden hints that they were Italian related. Like this one, you probably see a sign. There's a sign here, and that sign says in Italian, "Eleganti appartamenti," which means elegant apartments. Of course, here it's hard to see that there could be any elegant apartment, but that's what they were trying to sell to their Italian fellow citizens. And we chose many different sources, not only images, not only photographs, but we tried to go to the film division, and we tried to select some of the images that could tell us something about Italians in America, even through films. And I think that one of the most important films that we found was a film called The Italian, It was filmed in 1915. There were no Italians in the film, not any actor, not the director, but they found many Italian, I don't know how you say it in English, comparses, so the people that are in the scenes. They're not actors, but extras, yeah. And like here, they were filming in the California hills, in vineyards, and it really looks like a scene that could have been filmed in my region's hills, where there are vineyards, where people were dressed like this. So I believe that in this image, most of the people were actual workers of the vineyards, and they were actually doing their job. And in that movie, there's another, I think, extraordinary part, which is the very beginning, because the main character is Beppo, and he was supposed to be a gondoliere in Venice. So what they decided to do, they went to Venice, California, they put a gondola in the canals in Venice, and they filmed the whole scene in Venice. So it was a very nice way of seeing how Americans were trying to represent Italy here. And of course, the film had also some stereotypes, like the way Italians were talking. And this is Beppo talking to his wife, and that's the way Americans thought that Italians were speaking. And Italians were bringing many different aspects of their culture here. And in New York, there was a puppet theater, a Pupi theater, and this is, I think, a very nice picture of the Bain Service archive. And as you can see, many different kind of images. And here, there are the monkeys. Monkeys are very much related to Italian, how Italians were perceived here in Italy, in the States, because most Americans thought that we were organ grinders, so we're going around with an organ and a monkey. Here we have another show with Italian monkeys, but it's a way for us to show how we were related to this animal. And we tried also to show the bad aspects of Italian immigration here. Of course, there were problems with criminal organizations like the Mafia. Actually, at the very beginning, Americans were not talking about Mafia. They were talking about Black Hand, which was a mano nera in Italian, which was a way of signing letters that came from criminal organizations. And here in this, I think it was Puck, the magazine, under Uncle Sam's feet, you can see that there is Mafia. And it's probably one of the first instances in which we find the word Mafia pointed out in an American magazine. I really found this very interesting, this illustration, because it shows how hard it was for Italians, but how hard it was for all other ethnic groups to come to America. Of course, for the Chinese, because this was drawn after the Anti-Chinese Act, the Exclusion Act, and the artist was trying to tell how Chinese were going to go around the Exclusion Act. So they were going to come here as Germans, as Russians, as Irishmen, and as Sicilian. You see on the bottom right, there is a peaceful lullaby in Sicilian. And of course he has the dagger, which was one of the other symbols of our being here, according to Americans. But we try to speak about the criminal organization, because that was a way also of speaking about people like Joe Petrosino, who usually gets passed by in Italian American books because they don't want to deal with the Mafia. but Joe Petrosino was one of the first Italian detectives. He fought the Black Hand in New York, and then he was killed in Palermo. He was killed in Palermo because he was there on a secret mission, but the New York Post wrote an article about his mission, and so the people from the Palermo Mafia knew that he was there, and he got killed. And I was in Palermo 2 months ago, in the square where he was killed. There used to be a monument. Now it's not there anymore, because even us Italians lost the memory of people like Joe Petrosino. So what we feel in Italy now is that we must speak about the Mafia. We must speak about what's bad about the Mafia, not hide that problem. And in that way, maybe we'll remember better people like Joe Petrosino. And yeah, of course, we also dealt with the relationship between movies and criminal organizations. And so we have some pictures from The Godfather, but we also have pictures from Serpico, because Italian Americans are also in the police, and there are many nice movies that deal with it. Just a second. Linda, if you want to say something about the pictures, please do.
Now, it just struck me, I had to write the page about law enforcement and criminal activities in law enforcement. And I'm going, how am I going to start? I started with Al Pacino because he plays Michael Corleone in The Godfather, and then next you turn around and he plays Serpico in Serpico, so he's the bad guy and the good guy. He's all Italian-American. We also include in the law enforcement section judges and FBI people. They're the whole list of names that cover law enforcement, not just the criminal aspects that are exaggerated. A lot of us like to let us know are exaggerated. You ready?
Yep. In the book, we dealt with northeastern cities. Of course, most Italians were here, but we also tried to find images that could document their presence in other regions of the United States. And we can see it that as Italians went west, there were more scars. And this is probably an iconic image because this is the whole school population of Logan County in Colorado. And one of the two kids is Italian, so that was the Italian presence in that faraway place. And we used a lot of Louis Hines images, and I like them a lot because they don't only show the faces, but they also remember the names. And we tried to always put their names, even if they're unknown persons. We want to record their names in the book. Like the little child here was a Padroni. That was her name. And we were also, as Italians, we were also working in the fields. Most Italians that came had an agricultural background. They were working in the fields in Italy. But most of them, when they came here, had to work in factories, in road construction, in buildings. Not very many had the chance to work in the field that they knew. Here we have orange pickers in Florida. And here we have an Italian family, and that was a shack that they were living in New Jersey. And we found that the shacks were actually called Palermo. There was one called Palermo, there was one called Napoli, so that meant that there were only Italians who living in those poor houses. And Italians were also working in the mines. You see, I come from the north. I come from Modena, which is over the Apennines, so in the northern part of the country. And we tend to believe that nobody from that part of the country came to the U.S. as an immigrant. But by studying this, by working on this book, I found out that there were many people coming from my region that came to the U.S., and some of them went to Illinois and worked in the mines, and many of them died in the cherry mine disaster, which was in the beginning of the 20th century in Cherry Mine, Illinois. And many of them were kids, like these two, like the one in the front. Most Italian kids worked as mule leaders or breaker boys. And we even found here a book in Italian called Guida del Minatore. That's a miner's guide, which told all Italians, well, actually not all Italians, because no Italian could read, but the few Italians that could read could find in that book what an American miner could do or could not do. And even in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, there were many Italian girls that died. And you have here shocking pictures of that fire. We also found in Louis Hines' images a lot of images of home working. And we used many of them not only to show how people lived, how they worked in their homes, how many people lived in their homes, but also to show small things like the things that they were carrying from home. Here on the top right, you probably see a photo of a family. That's the royal family of Italy. And it's strange because most of the people that came actually came because Italy became a country, because Italy was unified under the Savoy kings. But it looks like Italians learned to be Italians here much before than they did in Italy. We learned it between 1914 and 1920. Here, you probably learned it in 1900. And this is another very iconic image. Of course, kids working was a big problem, not only for Italians, but for most new immigrants. And here we have 5 kids. They're all Italians. We have all their names in the book, and they're working right under the Capitol. This is a very famous image, as I told you. It's on the back cover of the Italian version. I was in New York last week to have a few presentations. We had actually a presentation on Mulberry Street, where there is a small Italian-American museum. And I was talking to Ludi Paolo. He owns one of the few Italian shops still in Little Italy. And he was showing me where that image was taken from. And it was very nice to talk to a man who had been living in Little Italy for his family lived there for over 100 years. He knew everything about that neighborhood. And it was very nice standing there with him and having him answer all my questions about what we were doing in those neighborhoods. As we go on with the story, Italians in America became American Italians. And that's the 3rd chapter of our book, which is called Citizens. And this is the first image that we chose to show in that chapter. And we feel that the change, the moment in which Italians became American Italians was when they decided to fight in the American army during World War II. Because by making that decision, they decided they wanted to stand with their new country against their old country, because Italy was an enemy at that time. And many of them worked also on the home front, and we have beautiful pictures of Italians working and building airplanes that could have maybe dropped bombs on Italy, because there were many bombings on our towns. One set of pictures that I really liked was the Nick Parrino's picture. Nick Parrino was a photographer who followed the U.S. Army in Sicily. He was of Sicilian heritage himself, and this image shows an American soldier. I think his name was Orivello. He was walking in Palermo and he found some cousins of his, and they stopped by and had ice cream together. And so Nick Parrino's images show the moment in which Italians in Italy met the U.S. Army, which was actually freeing the country. And then we go on and we show a lot of political people, and this is the image I chose just to represent that section. And in 1950, there were 3 candidates for mayor in New York. All 3 of them were Italians. This is not the winning candidate. He lost. His name was Joe Corsi. And it looks like next week there's going to be another Italian-American mayor in New York. This is an image that is probably more important to us in Italy than it is here in the States. Of course, soccer has never been a big sport here in the States, but in 1950 there was a U.S. national team made up mainly of Italians coming from St. Louis. They went to the World Cup in Brazil, and they won a game against England, which was the mother of soccer. And it's strange because the Italian team, which won, I think, 4 World Cup titles, had to wait 25 more years to beat England in a game. So Italian Americans were first on that also. And this is an image from 1949, so the year before, and the man in the middle was from a St. Louis team, and they were playing against Scotland. Yeah, this is an image I really liked because, as I was telling before, there are a few differences between the Italian version and the American version, especially when we have to explain things that people on either part of the ocean don't know. And as I was telling before, Joe DiMaggio for us was not a baseball player because baseball doesn't mean anything to us. He was Marilyn Monroe's husband, and that's why we chose this image. Football is not big in Italy, but it was my sport, and so I wanted to have Vince Lombardi in this slideshow. And we always try to pick things from the fiction and try to put it inside the story. And this is probably the moment in which fiction and reality combine, because I was in Philadelphia a couple of years ago, and that statue is still there. So probably America is the only place where a movie statue becomes a statue that really sticks and stands beside a museum. And I think for the first time in an Italian-American book, we tried not only to show people's faces, but we tried to also to show the things that Italian-Americans did. And so we tried to pick some artists, pop artists like these two, or more important artists like Stella, and try to show their paintings, or like in this case, comics. And these two were made by a man named Buscemi, the Captain America, and Oriolo, the Casper. Casper was actually invented by Joe Oriolo. We also went into movies, and we started from Rudy Valentine, Rodolfo Valentino, and this is probably his first famous movie, The Four Horsemen. We paid a tribute also to Martin Scorsese and to Francis Ford Coppola. I just want to point out one thing to you. The Main Street poster is not actually from the Library of Congress. This is one of the very few things that come from my collection, and this is the Italian version of the Main Street poster. And the subtitle in Italian was Sunday at Church, Monday in Hell. We couldn't forget John Travolta. And in growing up in the 70s and 80s, we never thought of Tony Manero as an Italian American. He was American. He was the symbol of America. And so it was only by being here that I discovered that he was actually more of an Italian American symbol than an American symbol. There are a lot of Italians that were famous in the music business. Perry Como was one of them. He was obvious. But not many know that, at least they don't know in Italy, that 2 of the 4 people that recorded the first jazz record were Italians. You see, the Dixie Jazz Band was formed by 2 Italian Americans and 2 Americans. They were based in New Orleans. And so we can say proudly that the jazz records start with Italian Americans. And of course, we have also very famous people like Dean Martin and Frank Sinatra. Dean Martin's name was Dino Crocetti, and Frank Sinatra was half Sicilian and half Genovese from Genoa. This is the last image. We decided to show some of the traditions that were shaped here in the States. And this probably the image that shows this very well, because this is a religious moment. And you never see a religious procession in Italy with an Italian flag, because religion and nation are very much apart in Italy. While here in the States, all the images I've seen of religious moments have also the Italian flag. And it's probably because by showing their belonging to a church, they were also showing their belonging to a nation, to an ethnic group. So it's something that it's very Italian American, just like spaghetti and meatballs, which doesn't exist in Italy. Okay, this is it. These are just a short selection. Thank you very much.
Would you like to take some questions?
Sure.
Two things I want to address. My early experience as a child, after World War II, maybe 5 years old, visiting my grandmother and grandfather in Pennsylvania. My grandfather was a miner. Neither one spoke English, really. They spoke Italian. So you would think I would be getting a lot of identification from my Italian. No, but I never looked.
Thanks.
But this was 3-4 years after World War II. My grandmother and grandfather had 12 children, 4 girls, 8 boys. 6 out of the 8 boys served in the military. So around the house, the mantle, the fireplace, the coffee, what was there? There were pictures of my uncles in American uniform. What's the reaction of a 5-6 year old kid when he sees that? Well, my uncles are in American uniform. There's an American flag. Well, that must mean I'm an American. It's simple. I mean, there was no doubt, and I had no problem ever defining my heritage. It was like mystical. What my mother and grandmother and grandfather did, they were obviously Italian. They were born there and they spoke no English, but they were my uncles in American flag. So as a result of that unique experience of going to see your grandparents, I got my identity as an American. And I just tell you, it's one of the most wonderful things. I have never had any doubt as to who I was. My second point is, you showed the apotheosis of Constantino Bruniti, and I'm the chair of the Constantino Bruniti Society in Washington. We worked to get him the gold medal from Congress, and now we want a stamp. The apotheosis is going to have its 150th anniversary in 2015. So we have applied to the Citizen Stamp Advisory Committee that they consider a stamp for Bruniti. Now, I must tell you something that is most wonderful. The embassy is completely aware of Bruniti. They put it, whenever they issue a book, Bruniti's in there. The ambassador, God bless him, had a meeting with the Postmaster General in July and said, you know, you should give some consideration to the Constantino Bruniti Society who's applied for a stamp. He had a sit-down meeting. So I thought that was very wonderful. So if any of you want to help me get a stamp for please see. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Don?
Could you talk a little bit about discrimination against Italian Americans during World War II and after World War II? How much of it was there? How overt was it? Were there any laws passed, restrictions on their movements and so forth?
It was nothing like what happened to Japanese
Oh, yeah.
Japanese Americans, but there were Italian nationals interned, imprisoned in the beginning of the war.
The weird thing was that most of them were imprisoned in Ellis Island,
Yeah,
which was the
including some of the most famous ones.
Yeah.
I mean, the DiMaggio family who lived in California, because they were Italian nationals, not American citizens, had their shop closed. But the numbers were
the
relatively
numbers
small.
were small, and it lasted only until 1942, and actually in 1943 when Italy pulled out of the war, and all restrictions were eliminated.
It's a big turning point, as this gentleman pointed out, that so many people of Italian background volunteered to fight on the American side in the war, and I think that started the change. But Italians were also associated with anarchy and labor unrest. So some of the people that were interned had actually, the government had been following their activities anyway. And that's all in the book too. But nothing on the scale, but more than people realize. Yeah.
You talked a little bit about the artisans that worked on the Library of Congress being Italian, and we hear that when we take tours of the building. But do you know if the ones that were recruited to come to work on the building, did they stay in America or did they go back to Italy?
I don't know about the people that built the Library of Congress, but as you probably know, one of the problems that Americans had towards Italians was that they were not staying here, they were going back. We had about 50% of Italians that came and went back. So they were feeling that we were just exploiting America, taking money out of America and going back to build our better lives in Italy. So considering that they were from Tuscany, and there are not too many Tuscan communities here, I'd say that they probably went back. There's only one Tuscan community that has to do with that field of work, which is in Barre, Vermont. Barre. It's spelled B-A-R-R-E in Vermont, and it's the granite capital of the world. That's how they call it. And most of the people were coming from Tuscany, and they stayed there.
There's Italians had a word for it, birds of passage, swallows. More Italian immigrants than other immigrants went back to Italy, percentage-wise. On the other hand, those that stayed sent a ton of money to Italy, so I think it came out even, and probably Italy was ahead.
Would you be willing to generalize the general opinion of Italian Americans today? Or if that's too general, then, what are some of the ways you believe Italian Americans are perceived in American society now?
I think it's a real mixture. I mentioned the TV shows, Housewives of New Jersey and Jersey, whatever girls they are, and The Sopranos. And so I still think American society in general associates Italian Americans with a certain kind of lack of education, and someone with crime. On the other hand, as I watch TV, more and more crime families are Japanese or Russian in American TV. So I think we've actually passed that point. On the other hand, we also have people of great political achievement. We have 2 Supreme Court justices. Forget politics. We have 2 Supreme Court justices. We have Nancy Pelosi. I don't think that having I think we're going to get the next mayor of New York. I don't think people have any trouble with an Italian name anymore. I don't think people would feel they need to, and I think they feel they could be professionals. So there's kind of a split in perception. I think in terms of Italy, everybody thinks of it as very sophisticated and cool now. The other problem is that Italy doesn't really think that much about its immigrants. That's one of the things.
I think there are more stereotypes about Italian Americans in Italy than there are in the States now. We probably feel that, we perceived Italian Americans like they were perceived here in the States maybe 20 years ago. Because now the image of Italy here has got to do more with good food, design, and the things I was saying before. In Italy, we live those things, so we don't feel that those things have any relationship with Italian Americans like probably you do. I don't know if I made myself clear.
My grandparents settled in West Virginia, and I understand that even once they came here, they viewed different regions of Italy differently. They were together, but still there was some animosity viewed from one area versus another. Any comment?
Yeah, it's very true. Even today in Italy, there's rivalries between neighbor towns, and so it's very typical of Italians to divide according to the regional provenience, and I think it's more true here because there were these small communities, very tight, like Sicilians, even not only Sicilians, but Sicilians from a particular town and Sicilians from another town. That's what Martin Scorsese said. His parents were from 2 different Sicilian towns, and in order to get married, they had the two communities had to meet and to agree on that, because it's probably something that happens in immigrants communities. I see it happening in Italy now, where there are many Chinese communities, but they're very divided among themselves because they come from different regions of China. And so, yeah.
In the late 19th century, early 20th century, the Italians who came spoke different dialects too, and so they tended to live together in groups where they could understand. I mean, there were reasons for that, as well as tradition, but even the language would have been different.
The Italian language actually wasn't spoken by the whole country until 1950, after television, because the Italians learned Italian by watching television. Before that, there were different dialects, but they're very different languages. If I speak with a Sicilian and he speaks Sicilian, I want to understand him, and he won't understand me if I speak my dialect. So it's, yeah, the language was a barrier. Did you have a question? No?
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.